pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, roll call, Catherine?
Oh, well, Robert Drake is our guest tonight.
Yeah.
MJ Reese is here, Robert Tialfi, Robert Cruikshank, and Bethia Waterman, and Catherine Del Tubo.
Thank you.
And I think Peter will probably be here because I think he's downstairs.
Yes, I think he's coming, and this is Michael.
Yeah, that's fine.
Oh,
I was just
what did I
wondering.
say, Robert?
No, you're good, you're good.
Okay,
Well, that's, I'm just writing them down because I missed everyone's names.
so Catherine has volunteered to be our secretary.
Great. This is just my own.
Yeah, all right.
That was the reason why I was so late.
And she's been doing an excellent job. And so our next order of business is to approve the minutes of October 17th. Did everyone receive a copy? Or would you like to review it?
Great. And I watched the video.
Do I hear a motion to approve the minutes?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Second? Second. All in favor? Aye. Minutes are approved. Thank you. Now, I put on the agenda, the next item, membership items, and that's an opportunity for those of you to report on what you've been up to. I think that some of you may have been attending meetings, trainings, and so who would like to? Robert, do you want to speak? Because Robert is our representative to the Ulster County Legislature.
The Ulster County Environmental Management Council met on October 26th. It was the first time I was attending. I was recently appointed to that. It's a 3-year term.
Speak into the mic.
Thank you. So the Ulster County Environmental Management Council met on October 26th. It was my first meeting of a 3-year term. There were various issues discussed. Energy was not really central or even in the conversation much at all. So I'm going to be digging into that a little bit more with them. And the minutes have not been produced, but as soon as they are, I will share them with the group so we can keep track of where the Ulster County Environmental Management Council is going. And you guys, committee members here, can guide me in terms of the things that you'd like me to bring up to at the county level. So that's the first item. The second item, I had a meeting with a company called Sealed, S-E-A-L-E-D, Sealed.com, on October 17th. They're in the business of helping homeowners convert from oil and fossil-fired systems to electric heat pumps. And they produce spreadsheets that show kind of what it will cost you to do that, like what it costs you to stay with your fossil fuels, whether it's wood or coal or propane, and what it will cost if you switch to an electric-powered heat pump, and the kinds of grants and rebates that are available to homeowners who participate in those programs. If it's okay, I'll take an excerpt of what they provided me and include it in the minutes so that people can kind of see an example. And again, that was around heat pumps and converting to heat pumps, which are much more energy efficient because of the way they operate. So it's actually more efficient than electric heat. It's more efficient than any fossil-based heat by a factor of 2 or 3. So while your electric bill would go up, your fuel bill, gets reduced to 0 if you're not using that anymore. The third thing I'll report on is a meeting with Infinity Energy on Tuesday, October 18th. Infinity Energy is a vendor that does solar assessments and solar retrofits for homeowners and business owners. What's interesting about them, and Beth, this goes back to the conversation that you had shared, I think, from when you were at one of the Woodstock meetings. they actually showed me a picture of my roof, like from space, like Google Maps, and then they said, which faces of the roof they would propose to put solar panels on. And again, they provided, a spreadsheet of, here's how much energy would be produced, here's how much you'd pay for it, here's what it would cost to do it, here are the rebates and incentives to participate, if you participate in the program. So helping me as a homeowner, and any of us as homeowners or business owners, to really make an assessment of, is this sort of worth it now? Is through some of the federal funding and the state funding, even county, is it sort of more doable now, especially in the face of higher fuel prices that our consumers are seeing? And then the last thing, I'll just remind everybody, please, point your neighbors to the Shandaken .gov, or is it .us? Thank you. Point your neighbors to the Shandaken.us. The town supervisor and staff have made sure that the link to the home energy audits is right there on the front page. And remember that those audits are free. So you get a free visit and a free inspection of your property and a free report that tells you how you could save energy and basically lower your costs for heating oil and electricity. And for many of our town residents, maybe as much as half, some of those recommendations will actually be funded for free as well. So without putting any money out, you could make your house warmer, more comfortable, spend less money, etc. And that's what I have for my report.
Thank you. Anyone else? Do you want to?
Sure, we had a great training on, basically, to boil it all down. I don't have my notes in front of me, it was so much information,
This was
but
the Lula thing?
this is the
Land Use Leadership Alliance.
Land Use Leadership Alliance, LULA, and very organized, very proficient. But one of my key takeaways is to see if Shandaken can start getting ahead of the climate action plan. It's to start putting rules into place for being proactive moving into the future. A lot of our planning is based on, hasn't been changed in 15 or 20 years. So it's something that could be really simple to do as far as with the support, they will give us support. And let's take a look at even the rules, and everything is pretty antiquated. It's been tabled basically from when I looked at some of the plans. And there's so much we can do to support the community moving forward. And there's lots of things that we can work on for that.
That is terrific.
So, yeah.
I'm very excited to hear this, that you're pumped up about that. For tonight's meeting, since we started our Conservation Advisory Council in April, we went through a period of gathering information and bringing in speakers who were able to inform us about programs and ways that we could become involved, etc. And I thought it was time for us now to take a step back and look and see where we are, what we have done, and then to develop a scope for next year, to try to figure out what we want to do and set some goals and some targets and some kind of planning timeline so that we can see how to move forward, how to implement some of these things like MJ was just talking about. So that is the purpose of tonight's meeting, and I gave everyone a copy of the Climate Smart Communities checklist that's attached to the back of your agenda. And I would just mention that before we move on that Catherine and I attended a county Zoom meeting on natural resource inventories, on the county's natural resource inventory, and it was quite a good meeting. There was no real substance to report. I mean, they asked us for ideas and to input, and we'll see what happens. But they're moving forward to create a natural resource inventory on the county scale, which does not mean that we are relieved of the potential opportunity to do it on a town scale, which would be a little bit more finer grained. All right, so I invited Robert to come because Robert is our superhero here in the Climate Smart Communities paperwork. So if you could just give us a little, update on where we stand.
Yep. So the Climate Smart Community Program, as the other documents you've got in here, it's fundamentally a rubric. And so there's a long list of actions. There's 50, 60 different actions, some of which are required, a number of which are quote unquote prioritized, and then others that simply give you points. And the ultimate sort of aim, the immediate aim, is to become either bronze or eventually perhaps silver certified, which is nice because it indicates a certain level of engagement that the town has had with climate change and sustainability and trying to be proactive with those things. But in the very sort of practical, cynical sort of sense, it gives you access to grants. And so it's access to money. And so there's a real compelling municipal interest in the town becoming initially bronze certified and then hopefully perhaps silver certified, because there's a whole slew of programs that we then become eligible for and much more competitive for. And to give some sort of scope for this, as best as I can kind of tell from their sort of reporting, only about 4% of New York's municipalities are certified. So for these programs, currently, when we apply to something, we're arguably competing against 100% of the other communities, either in the Hudson Valley or across the state. It's much more competitive. Whereas when we're competing for those that require these certifications, we're only competing against a much, much smaller group of folks, because a lot of communities really haven't taken these steps. And we're actually in a pretty, actually I would argue, a very, very strong position, in that the town has actually undertaken a lot of the activities in here. They just haven't necessarily had the documentation submitted and transmitted to this particular program. So to get to some of the specifics on this, the two mandatory requirements are effectively hit right here. So you have to have a Climate Smart working group, and you need to have a Climate Smart coordinator, and those are required base level actions.
Those are the first two on our list.
First two on there right there.
Yeah.
And so that gets us 30 points.
Yay.
And in order to be bronze certified, you need 120 points. So that right there, this meeting existing is 1/4 of the way there. So that's not bad. Going through a number of these other actions, you're, in order to be bronze certified, required to have 4 priority actions. And there's a list of items in here. It's in that last column of what constitutes a priority action. And this is actually, I'll double back on this, because this is an area where we have a few things that need to be done. The point is, you also have to have 4 of those. And then the last major requirement is, again, that we need those other 80 points. And there are a bunch of these actions that we've already done, have been able to acquire the paperwork on, and have it sort of submitted or ready to submit. They've technically been submitted to the program, but the program doesn't evaluate your paperwork until you've got enough to be certified. They don't really care that you're at 80%. You've got to have 100%, and then they look at your paperwork and then they say, okay, you've done everything you need to do. So to go through the ones that we have already done that I've been able to find the paperwork on, we've done riparian buffers. We have a local climate action website.
Robert?
Yep, sorry.
Do you mind referencing one of the numbers so we can get to that?
Yeah, so let me go through here.
Please.
I would just like to mention that Robert has set up a website, which is on the town,
Oh, great.
Shandaken.us. There's tabs across a green header, and to the right is Conservation Advisory Council. And he has put up the information that we have qualified for on that, along with other information about when our meetings are and who's on the committee and so forth.
So we've done a fleet inventory. This would be under PE3. It didn't have a prior number, but it's roughly where 3.9 would be on this list if you're going into that second column there.
That's done.
So that is done. LED streetlights, that's formerly 315, just a couple lines beneath that. More or less the full town has now LED streetlights. Just go through.
So does that mean that all the streetlights are LED? Is that the, like,
It means that more than 80%.
Yep,
Okay.
yep.
because the outdoor lighting reduction, I'm wondering if, I think some has been done, but not very much, right?
80%.
The light reduction as well?
Oh, light reduction, sorry.
All I can speak to is
think
the number
when
that
we
have been changed to
talk-
LED.
When we get into some of these, I've been doing this, working on this greenhouse
good.
gas government
Yeah.
Yeah.
operations inventory, and so we now know how many outside lights we have, and how much it costs for
Oh,
each
great, great,
light,
great, great, great.
and where they're located, and how much electricity they're using. And when this inventory is finished, we can then evaluate it and make recommendations for possibly reducing the number or somehow.
Or the,
Yeah.
having them go down instead of up, the lighting, is that what they mean by the light reduction?
Oh, you mean down facing, so they're
Yeah.
not,
Yeah.
A dark sky.
yeah.
So
That's what I thought it meant, but.
as a broad stroke, I mean, this
Yeah.
is sort of my own interpretation, but I would say that the bronze certification effectively means you know where you're at and you've got documentation. Like, in order to be bronze certified, you haven't necessarily, to be honest, you haven't necessarily done very much.
But you're on the map.
But you know where you currently stand. And in order to be silver certified, you have to take slightly more aggressive, more affirmative actions to improve upon where you were. So you can't get to silver certification with paperwork. But you can get to bronze certification with paperwork.
All right, got it.
If you flip the page and you go under PE5, it'd be roughly in the 5.11 area, community repair. I was able to find some advertisements related to community repair programs that were held admittedly a few years ago, but the reporting period is within 5 years. So they were still eligible to count.
Robert, what was the number on that, please?
So it's under PE5, and it's roughly where 510 or 511 would be. It's NA for.
I see it. Yep. Thank you.
Do we have residential organic waste program? Don't we have that?
Well,
It's in the paperwork?
no, the organic, that would be our compost program.
Right,
If
that's
and
what I'm
when we initiate that, we have applied for a grant.
Okay, good.
And the grant, if we will learn here in January. Again, that's on our list of projects that I'll
That's
go
fine.
into a little more detail later.
Okay, good, sorry.
Yeah.
It'll count once it's done, or started, anyway.
What?
It'll count once it's
Once it's started,
started,
yeah.
If you flip a page again, 7.1, climate vulnerability assessment. I found a bunch of documentation for that was in some of the flood mitigation planning that's been done over the years.
Perfect.
So
Ditto.
on that one, for example, it says 4 to 16 points. How do you assess what the
So this is obviously kind of a summary rubric, but then both in the website and in some of their further documentation, they break these out into what gets you the variable levels of points. So for this particular one, to be honest, I don't recall exactly offhand what was the level of points, but for example, the LED streetlights, you got fewer points if you were above 50%, more points if you were above 75%, the most points if you were above 85 or 90%. In this case, I believe it had to do with, it may have been the length of time that data had been collected or the geographic area that was involved or a combination of that. I admittedly don't recall specifically. In a lot of these cases, we weren't eligible for the maximum number of points, but we were eligible for some number of points there. And that one's important because that was also a priority action. Similarly, climate resilient hazard mitigation plan, which is 3 lines below that, numbered to 7.6, that basically is the flood planning. Four lines beneath that, cooling centers, number 7.9. There has been, in the summer, this building has been publicized as a cooling center on occasion, so that gave us points for that. I don't know that it's ever been necessarily actively used in that sense, but it has been advertised as one, so.
And actually, forgive me for taking a short break here, but when I talked about heat pumps before, they actually provide dual services. So they provide heating in the winter and cooling in the summer. So even if you have something like radiant heat in your house, you can actually turn that into radiant cooling in the summer using that technology. And we'll talk more about that in future.
Just 3 lines below that, 7.20, design flood elevation and flood maps. Those are very much on our website. We have quite a few flood maps. We have a whole bunch of local flood analysis areas. We got quite a bit of points related to that.
Do we have also, just one above that, the watershed-based flood mitigation plan? Is there any way?
I suspect we probably do,
Yeah.
although I don't believe I've found.
Like DEP would,
I would imagine so. Like I said, I don't believe I haven't collected.
right.
I haven't looked at it to collect it, I suppose. But I imagine we probably are eligible.
I think we probably have some stuff in there.
Yeah. Riparian buffers, still under P7.3 from the bottom, numbered 7.12. Reached out to a few folks at that Ashokan Watershed Management Program.
Yeah.
There we go. They've done quite a bit of riparian restoration on actually most of our streams at some point in time. I believe the one that I specifically used for points was
Stony Clove, Chichester?
I believe it was Stony
And also-
Clove, Chichester.
And Woodland Valley, where Woodland Valley comes into, Creek comes into the Sopus, that's all riparian restructure that's happening.
And to get maximum points, as I recall, it was 100 linear feet worth of restoration. I mean, it was relatively easy to prove, as I recall. It was, there was way more restoration than we needed for points. Probably way less restoration than we needed for waterways, but more than enough for points. I believe that's it on that page. The very first one, National Flood Insurance Program Community Rating System, 7.15. Shandaken is eligible under the community rating system. They have a rubric of their own and different levels of flood mitigation. In practical terms, when you have a higher rating within this program, it provides greater discounts on flood insurance. We are at, I believe, the lowest or the second lowest level of that program, so there is room for us to potentially improve in that program. So that's where some of we didn't get the maximum number of points on that, although those activities do get quite a bit more challenging, expensive, and aggressive as you go up. But nevertheless, we are a part of the community rating system and have been, I believe, as of last year is when Shandaken got certified under that. Farmers markets, this is PE8 8.6. We obviously have quite a vibrant farmers market going on, and still going currently in the Pine Hill area. Community campaigns, that's the very bottom one under PE8, 3 lines below 8.12. There has been some public information around climate change, sustainability, vulnerability assessment that's been put out by the town clerk that appeared to count under that program.
And we had a hoop over the summer.
Yeah, at the 4th of July parade, you mean? Yes.
I don't know that I put that in there, but
okay.
keep documentation on it.
We have photos and a banner.
There you go. Well, that's got to be worth something. The bottom 2 under PE9, that would be local climate action website 9.4 and social media 9.5. The local climate action website is the page that's been developed on the shandaken.us website that's documented Some of the things I'm actually talking about right now, this entity's creation, a few other things. And then ditto social media, that's really the town clerk using the Town of Shandaken Facebook page for putting information out. And if I'm not mistaken, those are the things that I've kind of currently collected documentation and points around. Not to say that that's every action that's been taken, just the ones that have kind of managed to get paperwork on. Going back a little bit to the program requirements, what I believe is, we'll call this the fastest track to certification, because when I've got it all added up, I believe it's 78 points, as I recall. But what we're largely missing is actually the priority action items. And so there's a couple ones to highlight, and this is actually going back to the first page. So the one is the government operations greenhouse gas inventory. That's a priority action and worth 16 points. That's what is currently, if you know, correct me on this, Beth, that's you're in a cohort program that's meeting, that's largely working with that. When we collected all of the billing information and kilowatt usage for all of the lights, that was related to that. It's basically attempting to capture all of the electrical and fuel usage of the government of Shandaken.
And was that PE 2.1?
That is, yeah, 2.1. Yep. So that's one of them.
And, yeah, okay, go ahead.
And then the other big one is the climate action plan. That's 2.6. That's the bottom one there in that PE2 section. Ultimately, that would be a plan that potentially this group would write that I believe would then be adopted by the town board. And with those two actions combined, plus those other things we discussed, I believe that would be sufficient to hit the number of priorities and very, very close to the number of points. I believe the only thing we would perhaps be missing would be, there's one other action. Just give me 1 second here, it was under communications.
It's 110, I think.
Climate change, education, and engagement. This is 9.1 on the very last page. It's the first one under PE9. That's a priority action that would be potentially worth up to 8 points. And so with that priority action, which could potentially be met by the town and potentially this group working in conjunction with the library running a climate change related program, that would hit the necessary number of priority programs.
Would that be like the program that you were talking about, is the analyzing your houses and doing energy audit? Would that fit under that?
Climate education is the overall,
And I think there needs to be a partnership of sorts in there with a not government entity. So the
Okay.
library is technically it's an own independent nonprofit entity.
let's just keep that as an idea. you
Yeah.
know, where-
I mean, I just thought that
because
was
this is,
slip, we're already kind
Yeah.
of moving forward on that, maybe we could slip
Yeah.
it under that
So-
category.
I think climate
That's an
education is a broad category, and that there are multiple ways that we
yeah.
can implement that.
Yeah, and at prior meetings, we've talked about, participating like at the event in July, at farmers markets, having a table.
Right.
At other
Yeah.
events.
And that would also fit under education.
Okay,
And so, all together, if I have done my math on this, it would come to 118 points with all of the requirements met except needing 2 points. And to be honest, when I was putting in these, I went for the fewest number of, basically the level of points that I thought was the most justifiable. Perhaps we could go a little bit higher and get more points, but I was fairly conservative in assigning them. There's a bunch of other actions that I think have been undertaken either in full or in part that perhaps could work, but I either haven't or haven't yet been able to find enough documentation to kind of back it up. But I'd say the rough summary is that we're quite close. We've probably done enough or nearly enough to be bronze certified. Silver certification is a 300 points and quite a few more requirements, so that's much more of a stretch.
I'm sorry, was it 120 that we?
120 for bronze.
Okay.
Yep. So I think, if I were to say a goal of sorts, becoming bronze certified within the first early part of 2023, I think is incredibly viable. I think it could absolutely be there. And then, silver certification, I'm not sure there's necessarily a timeline on that, but of course that could be something to work towards. And of course, I'm speaking about all of this as if it's points, and that's obviously at some level it's useful to be certified, but also these things do have value unto themselves, right? Like, oh well, we could save the world, but it's not enough points. I'm treating this like a kid trying to hit passing, But
It's so funny that you're so it helps motivate, I tell you.
Yeah.
we're
Does the
gamifying
300
it,
Does the 300 include the 120, or after 120 you start it?
It does include the 120. It's
Okay, so
inclusive
it's
of the
building on-
120. Yeah.
okay.
And so there are other programs that have connections with this. There's other things that are obviously environmental related that could be done. There are the grants themselves that we become eligible to upon being bronze certified. So there's a lot of directions that the group could consider, but the initial first step, I think the thing that opens all of those doors is completing that bronze certification, and we're very close.
I had a question about documentation. So, obviously there's different forms of that, photographs, paperwork, but when those things get completed, where if we were collecting that, where would they go next?
So ultimately, there's a portal assigned with the Climate Smart Action website. I have access, Beth has access, Peter has access. So any one of the three of us can upload those documents, and you basically choose which action. There's a slate narrative, very brief narrative. It's like 100-word narrative of what this is. Then you upload the documents. Along with each document you upload, there's a short description of what you're uploading and why is this proof. They're pretty, the directions are actually pretty clear of sorts of being like, when they say, do you have a climate social media account? They want a screenshot of a Facebook with the date. It's fairly obvious. Some of them are a little more complicated than others. Like I said, I've been fairly conservative and only doing the ones that I really felt were 100% provable, and not the ones that I thought were maybe a little more challenging to explain. But ultimately, if there was any documentation or anything that you thought might be supportive of these actions, I'd say collect it and then provide it to probably Beth. Yeah.
And how many of these have you personally entered on our behalf?
So all of this, like I said, it's in sort of a preliminary state. So anything that I've done is modifiable and editable and hasn't yet been mentioned by the state or seen by the state. But I've uploaded all those things I talked
great.
about. So we have the 78 points, and we currently have, like I said, we're 2 points off if we do the greenhouse gas inventory, the climate action plan, and a community engagement, and then we need two points more.
And
Well,
if you,
I think if we all read through this, because, it's incredibly detailed, and it's a little hard to comb through it all together and on the spot, but I think we will find more.
Yeah, I do too.
More possibilities that we can then help Robert verify. So I think it would be really useful for us all to sit down and read this carefully and come back next month and see if, you could
Find some
Yeah.
evidence.
put some evidence forth for other
And as a sort of
activities.
motivation of sorts, so a lot of the state's grant programs go through the consolidated funding application. So roughly twice a year, usually in late spring and then again in fall, the state has they reopen their grant programs. And then the reason it's called the consolidated funding application is at least the first part of the application, you can submit to a whole bunch of different grants at once. So it's all sort of the town information, things like that. And you can I'm going to submit to this grant and that grant and that grant, almost as if there's SUNY has a consolidated application for students where you can, apply to a whole bunch of SUNY systems at the same time. It's sort of a similar concept. And so a lot of the grants are reoccurring, and there's some of the grants that have open enrollment, but a lot of them are on those consolidated funding application sort of windows. And the next one I would expect would probably be around April, May. And so us being certified or applying to certification in advance of that would make us eligible to start considering those next year.
So these are good
Yeah.
good for our time planning for next year. That would be April, May 2024, if we could be certified.
2023,
23.
hopefully.
23, sorry. If we could be certified by that time. So, I would just like to commend Robert for all of his work, and also,
My superpower is paperwork, so.
also to say that, well, I'll lead into this greenhouse gas inventory. In order to do the greenhouse gas inventory, Robert had to go through all the boxes of all the bills for the year that we selected and pull out all the electric bills and fuel bills. And, you know, these are banker's boxes
Take
that
a
are
photo of
filled
them and then
with
transcribe them.
folders, filled with folders, and then photograph each bill and put that into a file, and then take the data from each bill and put that into a series of files.
I need better hobbies, is I think.
That's what you spend Friday nights doing.
And I was only able to help him kind of briefly one time
You definitely help.
by accident, but it was an overwhelming feat. When we started this greenhouse gas inventory project, we have a coordinator, I guess you would call her, who's helping towns through Zoom meetings. They call us a cohort, and we have 4 meetings, and we were way behind, because the idea was that we were just going to get all the information from NYSEG, and they would tell us, but for some reason that just never occurred. And we had to go through the old school method of getting the information.
And hopefully from here on out, we have it all on our bookwork, our QuickBooks. So
Yeah.
There was a year that we didn't have it on QuickBooks.
That was the year that we needed.
Yeah. So Robert took 12 months of NYSEG bills, and we have maybe 15 to 20 accounts, and then took all the data, the kilowatt hours, the dollars, and the reporting period, and put all that into a file. And so that is now done, and now we are working on getting all the information about the fuel use from the highway department, and as soon as we get that, which might be sooner rather than later, I will be able to put all that information into this template, which is called the Greenhouse Gas Inventory. And this template then automatically generates bar graphs and tables and can tell you a lot of information about what the town, where the town's energy use is.
It sets our baseline. It
Yeah.
sets our baseline for looking at the future.
Yeah, it's our baseline. It's
What year was it that you were?
2018 we're
Okay.
doing. So, as soon as we finish getting all the data into the template, then I have to, and Robert and Peter and all of us really, but write a report. But they've given us a template for that too. So you kind of punch in the name of the town, and it tells, then there's some text.
Almost
and
like a
then-
Mad Lib, but for climate data.
Yeah.
sort of.
Very good.
So that is the inventory, and I expect to have that finished, I hope to have it finished by January 6th. And the next step in this process is that there's a second cohort, and that's to produce a government operations climate action plan. That's the next step in this process. And the step after that is to do a community inventory, and the final step is the community action plan. So, I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but this is because this is a potential project for next year. And I thought tonight, if we talk about all the potential projects for next year, then next month we can decide which ones we want to pursue and who wants to work on it. Now, to do the greenhouse gas government operations action plan, which is number 2 on the list, we produced something that looks like this. It's a fairly big job. It's a document. We choose what goes in it, but it's definitely not a one-person operation. It is definitely something that we would have to work on together as a team, or a few people work on it as a team. I mean, I'm thinking that we might have to divide up some of our activities and create some working groups within ourselves.
I imagine there's a template to work off of.
Yeah, the same person that I'm working with for this first step, the inventory and the inventory report, will lead all of us by the hand to the trough to write this report. So yes, there will be another cohort and some more Zoom meetings, and it will go on for, I think, like maybe starting in January, February, March, April, something like that. So I've skipped in our review of and forecast for the future the compost project, which I think everyone knows we applied for a grant. We will hear in January if we get it. And I sincerely hope we get it. I thought it was a very strong application. If we don't get it, I think then we have to decide whether we want to commit to doing it some other way. Either try to raise some money or beg, borrow, or steal a storage container, see if we can, but that's further down the line. But if we do the compost project, we have to do a substantial education. There's a big education component linked to it, to develop people's awareness, to expand knowledge of the opportunity. And so I think there will be a need for some people to do some outreach to the public, and we can figure out how to do that. But one obvious way is to do a program in each library, Pine Hill and Phoenicia, to help people learn about it.
Educational program.
Yeah, educational. So that educational program is another one that might qualify for climate education. And this might qualify for the organic waste project too.
I suspect probably would.
Yeah. Now, the third program that we've talked about, and Robert's talked about tonight, is the home energy use and audits. And that's another program that we could expand with more community outreach, I think, in 2023. So we'll consider that for our list next, to kind of strategize about that.
And we could go beyond homes to businesses as well.
Yeah. And then there's the EV charger installation, which I know we've talked about, and everyone, I think, is the town and businesses and, both on a municipal and a commercial level, there's definitely a need and desire to install them, and I hope that we can figure out how to do that soon.
Yeah, I reached out to ChargePoint and just a little bit of a back and forth with them. So I don't have a lot to report on that yet, but it seems like that's one of the companies that are around that do this kind of stuff. I've been getting sort of talking with them about numbers on how much all this stuff costs, and it's pretty substantial, which is pretty amazing to me because they just look like they call them tombstones. They just stick out of the ground and they got two plugs on them. But there's clearly we have to run power to these things, where they go, they have to get installed, who owns them sometimes is an issue. And then there's also ways to make some of that money back if we wanted to not have it as a free municipal item. It could be something that we could charge people for, depending on where we put them.
Isn't there some money in the Inflation Reduction Act that's going to be sent to communities
Yeah,
for installing these?
I think all that is, I haven't even gotten that far. I'm just trying to get, yes, I think the answer to that is yes. I was just trying to figure out what the cost associated
Sure.
with this is
Yeah,
first, but absolutely, I think there's money to be
Yeah, I think
had there
that's
too.
part of that
Sure.
plan.
And also, we learned this year that there's a grant opportunity. DEC gives grants, and they come due in September 30th. So we just really need to have all our ducks in a row and to be able, and to, work to that deadline for
The
next year.
grants for the installation of these things, or grants for other
EV
things?
charging grants,
Wow.
yeah, so
I
we should,
know NICEAG also has some grants to do hookups.
Right.
If you find a place to put one, they will do a grant to connect it, which usually costs some money.
yeah.
But they'll have it installed ready.
Okay, so in addition to the grants, we need a timeline and costs, and that's, if we can get all that information, gather that information, then I think we'll be better able to take
Yeah, I
advantage of
should.
the grants when they
I'm
come.
hoping to have some more info. It's,
Yeah.
with that, it's just timing and stuff, but I'll work on that for sure.
That's just something that came in that you might be interested in.
Yep.
And in addition to running power to the devices, like you mentioned, they need communications as well.
Yeah, no, they do need it, because that's how they pay for those things, for
Yeah.
sure. Right. So that they
And
need
authenticate the charging and
Correct.
all that.
Yeah.
Another opportunity is to create a natural resource inventory, and that has, it's one of the items in our checklist here. And there was a grant opportunity for that at the end of September, but upon further investigation, I found that there was a substantial volunteer commitment on the part of the municipality that was doing it. In that case, that would be us. So this is something that we need to review and consider possibly for next year. But to the extent that the county is doing a natural resource inventory, at this point, I didn't see that it was on the top of my list. So I think, when we figure out our priorities for next year, that's one possibility, but it might be a lesser priority than some of the others.
And let me just add to that. When I asked the Ulster County Environmental Management Council whether or not they were doing, for example, solar rooftop inventories, they were not. So I need to understand who's doing it at the county level, so we can get a sense of just the buildings in our town can generate so much electricity. And kind of just en masse, what does that mean? What does that look like? What would it cost to do them for the individual as well as any business owners or government? And I'm not sure if anybody's doing that at the county level.
I did ask them, and in the meeting, I asked them that question. And they said, well, you and I can talk about this, because I don't really have the answers, so we'll talk about it. I'll tell you what they said. But more information needs to be obtained from them. Peter, I wanted to ask you about solar, but I would like you to sit next to a microphone, because it's very hard to hear you on the recording if you're not at a mic.
Right by my mic here.
I could sit right
Okay.
Get the nice fancy
the
seat
little
here.
chair. Well, there really isn't much to report. Solar Generation contacted us looking at the gravel bank, Glenbrook Park area. We own a bunch of property, and they were wondering if we would be interested in having them do some solar arrays up there if they could find a suitable place. Much of it Well, where the gravel bank is above Glenbrook Park, it's used as a gravel bank, and Eric is still mining in there, and probably has another 10 years of life left to it. Going to the left of it on the mountainside, it gets too steep for them to deal with. Going more to the right, it levels off a bit, and just below it, there's areas where there's high tension lines going through, and so they have to stay 100 feet away from the high power lines. But being near the high power lines is also good, because they tie right into it without much more cost. So it's looking good, but I haven't gotten they haven't gotten back to me with a proposal yet, but they're very interested in that location.
What's the impact for the town?
Basically, he said if they are able to hook in, if they're able to do some arrays up there, it could mean a 10% discount for the town. We would join a community solar program, and that's how they would do it. And possibly some rental fees, that would pay the town.
Is that 10% discount for the residents?
For everyone, yeah.
For everyone in the town?
Yeah,
That's substantial,
yeah.
yeah.
I just thought, what about up at Bel Air? Is Bel Air considered a private, public? Like, there's all that
It's
flat-
state-owned,
The rooftop has lots of,
it has lots of
there's
space.
a lot of exposure to sun, and no one's using the rooftop, so.
Well, we also brought him down here, asked him to look at this roof, the highway garage roof. He's very interested in putting stuff on the highway garage roof, as well as there's a materials shed up there where they mix salt in with the sand and up by the gravel bank, and he would put it up on the roof of that shed also as a collection point.
I think, MJ, to your point, that we would need to contact ORDA about that.
Because that's a private.
Well,
they're-
it's
I mean,
a
they're-
state
they're
run.
state.
They would
State run,
contact.
but they are running, they're a private, Orda isn't private. I mean, Orda isn't state.
ORDA state.
Or to state,
It is
Yeah,
state?
it
Yes.
is, yeah.
yeah.
It's a
I used
state
to work for them,
authority.
so but I know, I thought they were
Yeah.
private.
It's a state agency of some sort.
Okay,
Authority.
Olympic.
but that would be a great location.
Authority, Olympic Regional Development Authority. Yes. And we had heard from Kevin Van Blarkum that DEP was interested in doing solar at the wastewater treatment plant in Pine Hill. So, these are two potential and one good idea for,
Like Anisha School, that's in Shandaken. I mean, it's
That's
not
a big rooftop,
huge,
yeah.
but yeah, it's not as big as the Onteora High School.
No,
It's
but
a big,
true,
flat-
true.
Sorry.
yeah.
Well, I think they get on the parcel viewer and they look to see what is available, and I think they're making the rounds.
Okay.
On another note.
Yes.
The town board is doing an updated comprehensive plan. We're trying to put together a committee. We'd like to have a member of the CAC on that committee. We haven't appointed everyone or anyone yet at this point. There'll be a number of people from the planning board, a couple from the zoning board. I would like to see one or two. I know you guys are gonna be busy with
Yeah.
your upcoming homework.
What's the goal of the new committee?
The goal is to take our comprehensive plan was written in 2005. So we want to update it. Basically, that's our goal. And to put climate smart actions as a goal in that, which nothing is in our comprehensive plan that addresses climate smart.
And, working with the planning and zoning, there's opportunities to make recommendations for changes there also.
Absolutely, and, this will be a template to help us adjust our code book now, which I don't think there's anything in there about solar, and
No.
if there is, it's, no solar. probably.
No, it definitely needs to be revised.
Absolutely. And land use items need to be addressed to be more
So the
smart.
updated comprehensive plan will add to this list, because that's very important for us to be represented and
Yep. If
have
you
a
want to look
voice.
at the current plan, if you go on the website, you go to offices, and then you'll go down to the building department, open that up, and down towards the bottom, the comprehensive plan is there. It's, I think, in 5 links that you can click, and it's not really that long, you know.
I have a paper copy if
Yeah.
anybody wants to borrow.
Yeah, and if you want me to, if you need me to copy off I could copy off
And is it residential and commercial?
I'm sorry,
Is it residential
Whole town.
and commercial in
Yeah.
nature?
It's the whole town.
Yeah.
the whole town, right.
Transportation,
Yeah, but it's outdated because it's, you know, it's almost 20 years old, and
So I skipped over 2 other items here. Outreach, engaging with the public is something I think that we should try to focus on in 2023. I think so many of these different initiatives require outreach that
Yeah.
that is kind of obvious, but I think it's worth discussing and coming up with some ideas. And the other action that I listed here was pollinator pathway. I'm not sure that this is something that we need to undertake on this as a CAC, but since DOT created a pollinator pathway down there at their garage, just, near the border of
Yep.
Shandaken and Boyceville. Have you all, everybody know about that?
Yeah, well, I haven't stopped to
where they
identify
stop
the
mowing.
plants.
Right, no, I
It
had,
doesn't really look like,
Okay, well, right there.
okay,
right
but
next to
it has a
28,
sign and it says
the
pollinator
driveway that goes
pathway.
in,
So we don't
the
know
right
what's in it
side
yet,
kinda
but
goes down, but
Well,
the
they stopped
left side
mowing.
was a big
We know
field,
that.
and
they stopped mowing and they dug it up and they planted something, and it was different from grass.
It's true.
And we discussed it seems that, we live on, or this is a scenic byway. Route 28 is a scenic byway. There's a whole scenic byway program. We have representatives on the scenic byway, and it would be a wonderful initiative. It's a small world. It seems,
my man.
it seems kind of an obvious
They also like paperwork.
an obvious scenic byway sort of, program, but as I drive up and down Route 28, I think how wonderful it would be if they were visible, visible signs of trying to create a pollinator pathway. And there are other possibilities, but one might be at the new Rock Cut Park that the town is going to assume ownership of, if everybody knows where that is?
Well, if not ownership, at least management of it.
Management, okay. You know where that is? No. That's where the new bridge over the Esopus in Mount Tremper, if you're driving east, on the right side, you see, this new area which is receiving some public use. and public abuse. But, that might also be an opportunity there to put in some
Has
native
anybody
plants.
tried to drop off their jet skis in there?
Not yet, not yet. It'll happen.
I'm sure.
There's no ramp.
Other side.
also the
Yeah,
interpretive
yeah,
center,
it's still there.
right in that
Yeah, the
same,
interpretive center and the
I
property
wouldn't
across the
trust
street
it,
from the
though.
interpretive center,
Which
which
is-
is owned by the Catskill Center. So, there are other opportunities,
There are
but,
so
I'm
many
not sure
invasive
this is
plants
something
there.
that we need to, we can make suggestions.
I was gonna just jump back for a second on the outreach side. There's some other like low hanging fruit in there too. Like, can we invite people to this meeting?
of course.
I mean, they don't need to speak, but we can can get some points, I think, for this, and have them come. We're meeting anyway.
Please come.
Yeah, we would
All
love
of
to
you.
have you come.
But I think if we could put it out there that people are invited, like I
We'd
said, I
love
don't
the
know,
public.
I mean, I
You
don't,
can even do it for the public, and that would be counted as education.
well, that's what I mean, yeah. So, and I think,
Promote it.
I just don't know what the protocol would be, inviting people to speak, which I'm not sure that's the, I don't know if that's the point or not, but at least educational wise, they can hear what's happening, or at least in person.
Well, as long as our December meeting is going to be devoted to figuring out what we're going
Yeah.
to be doing next month, it would be an excellent time for people to come and tell us what they would like us to be doing. You know? And I promise I'll bring cookies if you'll come.
If the group winds up either having an event or creating any content, the town hall, I mean, Joyce can also send that out.
Well,
So
that,
if-
Yeah.
sure.
And so, you know, if there's, we want to address invasive species, or we want to encourage people to create their own pollinator gardens, and we've got a resource, we
Yeah.
do have that ability to transmit some of that information, as long as it's gone through some amount of, you know, vetting and approval by a
Yeah.
group, so.
Yeah,
There's our Facebook, there's the website.
sure.
Which actually has pretty good attendance. I mean, it's got, I think there are more folks following Joyce than there are citizens in town. So, I mean, we've got a pretty good
Yeah,
followership
she's
there.
doing a great job. Yeah.
Robert, are there any categories in here, under the Climate Smart Community Certification Action Checklist for, adding resiliency to local power, you know, microgrids and things that can work if the grid goes down?
Within this particular program, I do not necessarily believe so. It could probably be, if you had an improvement that did that, you could probably word it in such a way that it would fall one of these categories, but I don't think that necessarily applies. But there is a separate program.
It says here in 7.3, review existing community plans and projects to identify climate adaptation strategies and policies.
So, like I said, there's a few areas where, depending on what the specific thing that you did is, you know, for example, if you had power generation that was coming through a secondary source, you know, solar or something like that, or you had, you know, chargers or generators, you might be able to find a spot where that fits, depending on what they're connected to. But simply the active resilience isn't necessarily quite the same direction of this particular program. It is worth just at least having on your radar. NYSERDA has a Clean Energy Communities program, which is very similar to this in sort of design, and there's actually quite a bit of overlap in their actions.
Right.
And so I admittedly haven't spent a ton of time researching that particular program, but my sense is that once we're bronze certified here, we can probably backtrack to that program and see how far we get. But I would hazard to guess that that program, simply by the nature of what NYSERDA is and what they do, would probably have more alignment with those type of actions. So, still be beneficial. And again, like, while it's very nice to chase points, there's also the underlying, like, you know, improving resilience is also a good thing to do. So, you can do it even if it doesn't have points, you know.
Yeah, right, yeah. Yeah, we're not limited to point.
Yeah, I mean, I like
based
points, and it's very gamified, and it's quite fun,
Look at that.
but still, you know, it's one of those there.
Girl Scout badge.
Yeah,
And I think just given, you know, like the weather that we saw out in Hamburg, New York, you know, earlier this week.
yes,
You know, that's resilience, is being able to function in the presence of something that hasn't happened before.
yeah.
Be very effective.
And it's important that, you know, we still have energy, we still have communications, we still have heat. It still
Yeah.
gets people that are housebound.
I think that can or should be or will be, one, a section of that climate action plan that gets written, but also not an unreasonable area to discuss within the comprehensive plan. I mean, the comprehensive plan for the town is largely intended to sort of help guide both citizens and the planning board and zoning board in what sorts of developments and how development sort of exists within the town. Certainly being mindful of sustainability and resilience and things like that is fully in line with what those documents are intended to do, and can certainly help inform how our zoning officers and folks like that, you know, they address new projects. And so I think there's a whole bunch of venues for those discussions.
Great. And if I could just go back real quickly to solar installations, we talked about sort of the municipal piece of that. The residential side, I think, is going to be challenging for our residents, because in some ways, if you go to put solar on your house, they want to know what your electric bill is, and then they want to size your solar system to offset your electric bill on an annual basis. So you'll make as much in a year as you'll use in a year. In some months, you might use a little more, a little less, but it kind of nets out to zero. But if you're in the process of saying, well, I want to convert my heating system away from propane or natural gas or wood, you know, towards a heat pump that's going to use more electricity, now you need to say, well, wait a minute, that's not my it's not my anticipated electric bill anymore.
Yeah, you have to do that before you
Yeah.
get your solar panels.
Yeah, so, and can you combine that? You know, can you say, well, here's my existing electric bill, here's my existing fuel bill. If I cut the fuel out, you know, through heat pump or whatever, then how big a solar system do I need? And can I kind of plan that as a single shot?
Yeah.
Because I think that's the challenge that's going to be in front of many of our residents.
That's true, yeah.
That actually could be a fairly, you know, decent part of your community engagement. If I'm a person who knows nothing about heat pumps, nothing about solar panels, nothing about any of this, can you, you know, draw the A to B for me? You know, if they can the town, can this group provide a resource of being like, okay, yeah, I need to first get someone to come by and measure what my heat pump viability what might be and estimate what the cost of that might be, and then do so, like, you know, if that's I think an educational component that
Yes.
a lot of folks.
I called that up here with this home energy use and / audits. You know, that's where I think we can really be helpful. And I know I mentioned before that I attended, the town of Olive had a very effective presentation to the public, which I attended. But, you know, they did a serious planning in months in advance in order to notify everyone in the town by mail that they were having this speaker come, and that the, you know, opportunity to find out this information. And we can have that speaker come, you know, and we can plan it in advance. It's just, we need
wanna
to
put it out there
figure
to make
out
sure the
when.
public knows.
We need to start a few months in advance to get it
Absolutely.
on the agenda, and to do the outreach necessary to tell people.
I say that entirely selfishly. I would love to have a meeting where I could go in and someone would say, okay, well, you know what, you need to do X, Y, and Z to consider heat
Well,
pumps and solar for your
no,
house.
I
Because
think-
I'd love to consider it for my
I
own
think there are many
place.
people like you,
Yeah.
Robert, for whom this information
Absolutely.
is it's very hard to ascertain on your own, and there is help out there. So we can do that. She said. Confidently.
Well, if it does go out, it's a huge win. It's a huge
Yeah.
win, both sides. For people to get a huge win,
Yeah.
and then we get a good win for promoting something that's useful and substantial.
Yeah, definitely, a big
Feel
help.
their pocketbooks.
I mean, I envision a meeting at the Phoenicia Playhouse, you know, something on that scale, you know, where you could really get a lot of people to come and have, and it might be more than one. I mean, because, you know, you can't do heat pumps, energy audits, and solar all in one night. You'll be too confused, yeah. So, well, it's a lot to think about for next month and next year, but it's exciting, I think, that we have some opportunities to do things, make a change, yeah. So, if there's a motion to adjourn, we'll adjourn the meeting, but before we do, I'd like to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and encourage some of our viewers to come to a meeting.
December 19th.
December 19th at 6:30 is our next meeting. Yes.
And come share your experience with having a free energy audit, and what you got out of it.
Second.
Second.
Is there a motion to adjourn?
I motion to adjourn.
Thank you. Okay. Second? Second. Good. The meeting is adjourned.